All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. Thank you for tuning in. However you consume your podcast, whether you're watching us on YouTube or wherever else, we thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, share. Can't speak today. Haven't had enough cider. Share with your colleagues, your friends, your mother-in-law. Tell everybody to tune in. I'm Caleb Talley. I'm a Startup Junkie. I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Ward and Davis McEntire. How's it going, guys?
Living the dream.
Living the dream, yeah, going well.
That's what I like to hear. We're excited to be joined today by Joe Payne.
Hey.
Joe Payne is a longtime Northwest Arkansas entrepreneur. He's been in the entrepreneurial space for a while. He founded Moxy Ox. He was with RevUnit, and he's doing some cool new stuff lately, and we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. But Joe, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess kind of how we've been kicking these off of late is to really just get into the origin story. Tell us about Joe. Let's go back to Genesis, skip the who begats.
All the way back.
All the way back. Take us on the way back machine.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I've been in Northwest Arkansas for a long time. Founded Moxy Ox back in 2012, I think. Really got plugged into the startup scene up here through that. It's just fallen in love with being an entrepreneur. I think once you get a taste for that, it's really hard to go back to having a job.
You're unhireable.
Yeah, in a way you are, right? Like you kind of get forced to work on a very different set of skills. But did that for a while. Was at RevUnit for a long time, 6 years or so, which was a blast. But around, I don't know, I guess early 2021, kind of got to the point where I was like, I feel like I need something different. So decided to kind of take a step back and just reevaluate what it was that got me excited. I've been kicking around ideas for a while. Wasn't sure if any of them had any real merit, but decided to take the plunge and do that. Somewhere along the way, I found Web3 and NFTs and went down the rabbit hole. And here I am a few months later with a startup in the space and doing some pretty cool stuff that I'm excited about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. What's the startup you've built around Web3?
Yeah, so we're working on an entertainment brand really called Society of the Hourglass. So we're working on an illustrated children's book, an animated series. We've got a partner out in LA and a production company that was kind of a relationship of happenstance. We both, some of their team and I both knew the same artist. They were looking to get involved in Web3. And so he connected us. It was like, hey, I'm not an expert, but I'll share what I've learned along the way. So we just really hit it off and had so much alignment from a values perspective. And they really dug the IP that we were building. And we just decided, like, man, we've got to try to find a way to make this work and do something. We're in the process now of like hiring a writer for an animated series, which is wild. The whole space is new to me, but I'm having a blast. In fact, after this, I've got to go jump on a call talking to a writer that's won a couple of Emmys for some of their other work. And we're talking about real caliber stuff, really high caliber of talent for this. And, we've got the NFT collection. And so owners of the NFTs get to participate in the process of kind of creating the story and the foundation of the IP for us. They have shared commercial rights so that they're able to monetize and create their own, stories, properties based on the characters in a way that traditional media just wouldn't empower someone to do. Right? Like the analogy that we like to use is, imagine if like Star Wars had started as an NFT collection and you minted like Darth Vader early on. And so you owned part of the IP of Darth Vader. So as the brand grew, like you're kind of attached to that. And you can go create your own stories based on Darth Vader. Like that's the concept behind what Web3 companies are trying to do around IP rights. And, I think our studio partner out in LA very much shares that philosophy, the traditional top-down studio model where it's suits in a boardroom, kind of evaluating demographic data and viewership data. Like all those things still matter. Like that's you don't just change an industry overnight, but we think that this kind of more grassroots, bottom up approach of communities of fans coming together and telling stories and creating IP that then have a much stronger kind of starting point than maybe a studio think tank started or originated IP has. So yeah, we're trying to make a go of it, and we're having a blast with it.
That's interesting to me because, like, you see a lot of companies kind of dipping their toe in the Web3 and the NFT space, just kind of out of convenience or trying to tap into the, like, if you're a Topps, you mint a baseball NFT baseball card, or if you're a photographer, you turn your album cover that you shot into an NFT. Yeah. It's like you're creating something from the ground up and kind of a new space that feels, given I don't know a lot about this space, but that sounds very unique.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like part of the dynamic of the space, at least in the last year, has just been that it's still so wildly speculative. Like there's a little bit of like a gold rush mentality, and you see these kind of really exceptional stories of like Yuga Labs and Bored Ape Yacht Club as a kind of the poster child example of like what can happen when something really takes off, and something that minted for the equivalent of a couple $100 at the time is now worth like six figures. It's just unreal. And so you have people and companies trying to both tap into that for the short-term gains that can be made, as well as kind of really figuring out what the long-term play there is. And I think if you kind of look aside from the speculation in the space, which is still very much a part of it, I think that goes away over time. It'll probably always be some part of it, but I don't think it dominates the conversation long-term in the way that it does today, because the real power in it is in the technology and how IP and ownership works and access and distribution. It's, if you look at kind of the advent of the internet back in the early to mid 90s with, you had like AOL and Netscape, and now suddenly we just have access to all this information. And then with Web 2, you had social media and kind of this idea of online communities starting to form. And now with Web 3 and blockchain technology, the kind of the underlying like immutability of the blockchain, the spirit and ethos of the space really leaning into decentralization and greater access and distribution for kind of the everyday person. I think there's a really powerful move to be made, and I think it'll shift how things like online commerce and entertainment IP and things like that work. The language around like Web3 and NFTs will probably fade into the background, just like all of the technology conversation of past advances has. Right now, it's an important part of the conversation, but for the everyday person, like they don't care that it's Web3 or NFTs. They don't need to. Like what matters is the experiences that it allows them to have, or the things that it allows them to do. And I think once we figure out how to really kind of tightly tell that story and make it really easy to understand, because right now it is so tech focused. There's a lot of friction to getting involved in the space. Even as someone who's been working in tech, like it's not easy to get involved in. But once we really start breaking that down, I think that's when we'll start to see like true mass adoption of the technology come into play. And then things like with Society of the Hourglass, we've got this IP of these illustrated characters that are like have mass appeal, and that they're based on real historical figures. And so there's all of these really cool opportunities to tell stories in ways that I think everybody is going to be excited about. That's the future that really kind of jazzes me up. And when you think about a future where we've got the book or books and the animated series, toys, merchandise, there's so many opportunities now to kind of experience and be a part of this brand. But the people that were involved early and that did understand NFT and Web3s got to be a part of kind of shaping what that looks like. It's really cool.
That's especially interesting to me because what I do understand about, NFT market, the blockchain, everything, it's kind of the application towards more of a finance, decentralizing the finance aspect of it. But this application in entertainment is unique to me because it's not about an asset that you're holding on to for financial gain. It's your ability to kind of shape the narrative in the story arc. You used Star Wars as an example earlier, and it's a perfect analogy because whenever whoever owns Star Wars at any given time, of course we know who owns it now, but when they roll out a new movie or whatever, there's always going to be a faction of the fan base that's like, this is crap. Like, why did they do this with this character? Why did they do this? What the hell is episode 1 through 3? That sort of stuff. And so having like the folk from the ground up to where it's like, okay, well, we're invested enough into this character and the storyline that we're going to shape the story arc around it. I think that's a unique approach.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I mean, even if you kind of, like, you're never going to be able to make everybody happy, right? Inevitably, there's going to be someone that probably hates what you're doing. Yeah. It's like, you just have to kind of accept that.
They could be giving out puppies and $100 bills, and someone's going to be pissed
about it. But like, I mean, even if you take away like monetizing what you're doing, just like say you're really passionate about this universe, you say it's Star Wars, you want to go write this really cool fan fiction, and maybe you want to figure out like how to get that in people's hands. You're not even trying to sell it. Odds are, if you get enough traction, it's going to get Disney's attention, and they're probably going to slap you with a cease and desist because they don't want you sending out that kind of
unmarked
stuff.
Like all black SUVs following around town.
Whereas the way we've approached IP rights with our characters, like we couldn't do that to someone even if they wanted to. Like they have shared ownership over those characters, so you can really lean in and create kind of your own stories, even if they're not like officially part of the canon. And so, there's like the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, right? Like you can figure out how to navigate the legalities of it. The spirit of what we're trying to do, though, is just co-create with all of the people that are supporting early on. And that's where all of the like really interesting, fun ideas come from. You have people that are like, they get it. They're involved because they want to contribute and put their mark on it. And, we're going through some processes in our community. We run it on Discord where we built out a narrative handbook as an example. So that's what we're going to give the writer that we hire to write the pilot episode. That was all contributed from like content from the community that they contributed. And, there were things in there narratively that are totally different than what we had intended that when we set out to create this, but it's what really resonated with the community at the time. So just, it's like one small example of the power of like letting people kind of into that process and just embracing the discomfort of kind of giving up some of that control.
Right. And can you give us any insight into what that, I know the narrative is, you've got a handbook around it and it's not written yet, of course, story-wise, the pilot, but like, can you give us an insight into what our listeners, what we can expect from that?
Yeah. I mean, so you're right. We don't have like the story of an animated series, but what we have done is kind of establish the foundation of the narrative universe, right? So the Society of the Hourglass narratively is this organization that kind of exists behind the scenes of time. And nobody really knows how it got started. It's led by a group of people known as the stewards. And so the stewards are based on real historical characters. So like Leonardo da Vinci, Queen Nanny, Nefertiti, like these really interesting characters from all across the world. Then you have the competitors, which are also based on real historical figures, who are basically kind of being sent on these trials throughout time to compete for a spot in the Society of the Hourglass. And the Society's mission is to kind of explore and understand humanity's role in the universe. So we think about it as a vehicle for educational content, entertainment. When you have this foundation of real historical characters, there's a ton of like character development that's already happened in real life because they existed. But then you layer on sci-fi and time travel and fantasy, and like it gets like Doctor Who, right? Like the sky's the limit. You can do pretty much whatever you want. And so we've got our robot, Nigel. He's a part of the story as well. In fact, this is one of the examples of like how the community kind of changed what we intended. Nigel as a character started as a like just dumb joke we were making in our team chat about having this like, kind of goofy like C-3PO like robot assistant. And then our artist just kind of went with it and created him. It's like, okay, cool. So like he's got to be part of it now. Well, when we were going through our first writer's room process with the community, I don't even remember where it got started, but somewhere the idea, like, what if Nigel wasn't just this kind of bumbling goofball? What if he was the one that started the society and like no one really knows where he came from and he organized the first group of stewards? And, like, now that's canon. So like now we have this opportunity to explore Nigel's past. And like, wow. So anyway, it just, it's this really broad, rich world that takes place across all these different times. Mars Base 7 is set far into the future, and that's kind of where society has set up their shop. No one's ever traveled past that point in time before because they don't know what's out there. And
can't be lawn out there.
And so now we've got this group called the Dust Runners that are kind of I won't call them the bad guys, but they're like an antagonistic group, right? And so they're kind of operating based on their own laws. And so they don't really care what the society thinks about the rules of time travel. They're going to use it for their own benefit. And we're trying to lay the foundation for all sorts of interesting stories. That's ultimately what it all comes down to, is storytelling.
Joe, how did you come up with all of this? I mean, the creativity process in front of you, is this something that's been in your brain for a while, or did y'all just have a lot of drinks and figure it out?
It's probably more of the latter. Getting involved in the space started as a conversation between myself and my co-founders. Like we started trading NFTs just as collectors. And so it really started just as an experiment to learn more about the space. We felt like, like most entrepreneurs, the best way to learn something is just to jump in and get involved and do it, right? So we're like, hey, let's start something. As collectors, we had seen a lot of things that we didn't like about the space, the way it can take a toll on your mental health, because there's a lot of really negative energy. There can be a lot of really unhealthy behavior that's reinforced to try and, get access to this exclusive drop or that exclusive drop. Yeah. And, between that and just seeing like, hey, it feels like a lot of what we're seeing come out of the space isn't really about long-term value. It feels more optimized to just kind of try and take advantage of whatever the current trend is to make a few bucks. Man, that doesn't feel good at all. If that's the future, then this probably isn't going to go anywhere. So we decided we were going to try to do something that addressed some of those challenges. And then through that process, we started honing in on things like, well, NFTs are way too cool to be stuck on a screen. So what's something like physical that we could do? And that's where the book idea came from. And our artist has done several other children's books. And so it felt like right up his alley. It's going to be a seek and find book, like Where's Waldo, but featuring characters from our NFT collection and others. And then from there, like the story just kind of started building and building. We kind of settled on this idea of time travel, and just collectively through different conversations and individual brainstorming sessions, we ended up with the soup of ideas that is what it is today in the Society of the Hourglass.
Well, Joe, this seems like such an unprecedented approach to the entertainment industry. Like, do you see kind of the powerhouses of the industry, tapping into this bottom-up approach? Or if not, kind of what was the inspiration?
Yeah, no, it very much is. And look, we're not the only ones in it, right? Like there are some really, really talented teams that are taking a very similar approach. We're learning a lot from some of them that have been around longer than we have. But, when you look at the traditional companies like a Warner Brothers or a DC, like you see them experimenting. You were talking about that earlier, with them kind of dabbling and, hey, we're going to try this or try that. Very much not leaning into the spirit of like bottom up IP building. Exactly. No, it's more about, hey, we have this wildly successful property. Let's see if we can, do a drop that people are going to get excited about. And sure, like, because it's Batman, like people are going to get excited about it, but they're not really doing anything innovative. I think DC has done a couple of experiments that I think are interesting and might go somewhere long term. But as far as like community storytelling, building new IP, like that's kind of coming from the spirit of the space, there's just not that much of it yet. There are a few other. There's a couple of films that are trying to finance through NFTs, which is really, really cool. Kind of putting the power back in the hands of the writer and director and the creators, so that they aren't as beholden to maybe studio requirements. Now, the challenge you have to solve for is like distribution, right? So there's still a scenario where you've got to learn how to play ball with those companies. And, the difference, though, and where I think the power in this approach comes from is, like I said earlier, you now have this kind of track record of building this up. There's already this like really invested and empowered and impassioned fan base that really wants to see this happen. And so it's not as much of a like crapshoot on like, hey, we think this is a cool idea. Maybe someone else will too. It's like, no, we can point to the NFTs, the other stuff, the process, the community of people that are contributing, and just show and demonstrate in a really meaningful way a lot more traction in the IP.
It's less build it and they will come. It's like they built it, they're there.
Exactly. Exactly.
What are some of the challenges you've seen, obviously, going from this, bottom up approach and building it from the ground up kind of?
There are many.
Of course.
As with anything. I mean, like one of them is just the fact that industry is new to me, right? Like, and to the rest of the team. Like most of us don't have a background in film or entertainment. And so that's where our studio partnerships have been so critical. They've been great about not only kind of helping us through the process, but just understanding the industry. Right. So that's been great. The other challenge is just the time that it takes. The NFT space in general just operates on a time scale that makes absolutely no sense. It's so fast, like attention spans are literal like hours sometimes, and you'll have something major that seems like, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. And 2 days later, nobody even remembers it. And so when you're trying to compete for attention in a space that's already so saturated, there's so much happening, it can be really hard when your value proposition is like, hey, we're going to have this book that's going to come out in like 6 months, and like everybody's like, oh, well, I want to go 10x my money tomorrow. Right. And so, it's a challenge. I think that changes over time. What is going to be critical, though, in getting there is that we continue to see teams lean in and just not reinforce that type of buyer behavior. And then I guess that mentality too, just, the fact that so many people are in that space right now to make money. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with that. It's just, man, optimizing for that versus building something sustainable and scalable long-term are two very different processes.
Keep up to date on the latest news in economic development with the Arkansas Economic Development Commission's Arkansas Inc. newsletter. Each month, get the Arkansas Inc. newsletter, which spotlights the latest project wins and developments throughout the state, delivered to your email. The newsletter features major project announcements, company expansions and relocations, news articles, rankings, and more that highlight why Arkansas is a great state to do business. The newsletter is a snapshot of what AEDC has been working on and what we are following. The Quarterly Tech Trends newsletter highlights the latest news in Arkansas's growing tech sector. You can learn about new Arkansas tech companies, computer science and cybersecurity initiatives, funding and venture capital announcements, and even more. AEDC offers 4 quarterly newsletters: the Food and Beverage Industry Digest, Aerospace and Defense Beacon, Timber Trends, and Tech Trends. To learn more or sign up for a newsletter, visit arkansasedc.com/news.
And so you just have to figure out how to balance that, right? So we're thinking about it from the perspective of like, how do we reach out and meet people where they're at? Not even about NFTs. Like, how do we get people excited about the book? Because it's a cool book and it's fun and it's got these really cool characters. How do we get people excited about the animated series that may not even know about NFTs or care about NFTs because it's got these really fun storylines and good talent behind it? So again, those are longer term plays, but as we build out this IP, that's how we're thinking about growth. It's the NFTs aren't the point. That's just kind of the starting point.
Yeah. I could see, I mean, your consumer, your average consumer of the television series and even the book are probably not even going to know or care that they are in it. You think about like,
that's exactly
they're watching
right.
TV, they don't, or watching however they're going to say TV, streaming it or whatever. I'm not going to care that's NFT. They're just, they're interested in the content,
they're
and the characters.
Right?
Yeah,
totally.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it's only successful because they're NFTs, then like we're doing something wrong.
Yeah,
Like that's only going to go so far. Like we have to tell really compelling and engaging stories.
And I feel like there's such fertile ground there too. You talk about like kind of, you do already have, like with the historical figures, you already have the kind of character development around that. However, you know historically what they did, but kind of the opportunity to go into the motivations behind
Exactly.
the
It's exactly right.
actions. And then the fact that there's time travel, you can bounce around and do anything. It's kind of like Marvel now. Nobody's actually dead. You can do whatever you want. I mean, you can just hop and skip and jump around to anything, but it also just creates a blank canvas that just stays like, not blank canvas, but an ever expansive canvas.
That's right.
You get to the end of the canvas, you still have more canvas to go. Right? So it's like a lot of opportunity.
Fork and go in another direction.
Exactly. So it seems like a lot of fertile ground there.
Totally.
And so as a result, like I'm curious. So starting with the television series, then the book. The book is, you said, kind of like a Where's Waldo situation. Do you see that eventually turn into like a comic book style, and then what's next after that?
I mean, the dream would be that, like, all of those kind of opportunities come up, right? We're in the NFT space. You'll hear teams talk a lot about their roadmap, like and I think what's challenging about that, especially with kind of the fever pitch pace of the last year, is that that's the thing that these teams would talk about to get people excited and willing to throw some money into it. Well, the challenge is, like, sometimes reality changes what's in front of you, and maybe this doesn't make any sense anymore, but you said you were going to do it 6 months ago. So now if you don't, like, what's the line there? And so we think about it more from the perspective of, like, we're building an entertainment brand. We think there's really great opportunity to create this book. We think we have an opportunity to create an animated series. Like, if something happened and we had to pivot, like, our community has, like, been a part of that conversation, right? And so long term, I would love to see it move from this one book and this, one, like, season of a show that we're trying to get made into a series of books, and maybe comic books. Maybe it's coloring books. So we have toys and plushies. Like, the possibilities are endless, right? I think really it just comes down to how the market receives it and what people get excited about and where they want to see the brand brought to life. I mean, we've even got some kind of online browser-based game. It's based on draw poker, but right now you can use your characters and they give you different perks to play the game. So it's like one of our character types is oldies, that, like, little old ladies and men. They get to peek at the deck 5 times in hand. So it's like, it's cheaters poker. So you pick 3 of your characters and stack your cheats, and then just try to earn as many chips as you can. And, our long-term goal is that that's going to transition into a reward strategy where you can now redeem those points for stuff, whether that's other NFTs or merchandise that we release and things like that. So sky's the limit on that kind of thing.
So what's the end goal? Is it to be acquired, IPO?
Yeah, I don't know that I've thought about it in that context before. I think right now we're just focused on trying to do the best job that we can and building out the foundation of this IP. I think if there's a scenario where a Netflix or a Disney sees so much value in it, they want to fully acquire it, like, maybe that's an interesting conversation. Maybe not, right? Like, it would depend on the deal. We're also thinking about it maybe a little more discreetly, is like the strategy for the series is maybe different than the strategy for the book, right? If there might be a scenario where we would sell the rights to the series to a distributor or a streamer, because we believe they have the reach and the platform and the demographic that we think it's going to resonate with, and they make the right deal. But we wouldn't want to give up total control of the IP. I think in a perfect world, we would see each of these kind of manifestations of the IP succeed in their own right. Meanwhile, we're able to just continue growing the core IP on our own. It would just have to be the right opportunity for us to feel like bringing it under some other major umbrella felt like it made sense.
I had a question. I forgot what I was going to ask.
Well, you said that you were in that accelerator program and you got some funds from that. Have you raised capital outside of that?
So that was a different venture. Yeah. So with Society of the Hourglass specifically, no. We're funded exclusively through the NFT drop, which is currently minting. We've released it in what we've called chapters, that really just kind of arbitrary buckets of the total supply. So within that paradigm, for anyone that's listening that maybe isn't familiar, you'll typically see NFT collections like what we're doing release, anywhere from like maybe 5,000 to 10,000 pieces in total. And so our total supply is 8,888. So we've released that a quarter of it at a time, and 2,222 pieces per chapter. So we sold out chapter 1. We're currently minting chapter 2. And the idea is, in a perfect world, we see that fully mint out. That's what kind of continues to fund, both the team's efforts as well as just further development of things like the series and other things. Now, what we are doing is in the process of writing a grant proposal to do what we think are some pretty interesting things. We're in talks with a few people at the University of Arkansas around their film program and what they've got a new minor launching in September that we think is really, really compelling. Want to work on a strategy towards how that could maybe be the first step towards a much larger effort on their part to bring talent into the area. One of the challenges, we had True Detective season 3 was recorded in Fayetteville a couple of years ago. You don't see much production happening here, though. And part of the reason for that is that, one, our tax incentives for the entertainment industry just aren't as competitive as other areas, right? Like Georgia has a really great reputation in that regard, because I think Atlanta specifically, because they've gone so heavy on tax incentives for production companies. So anything that's set from Oklahoma East is probably recorded in Georgia, shot in Georgia.
Just it's live action at the end of the
So that's one challenge. The other challenge is that because the infrastructure doesn't exist, there's not as much talent here. So a lot of it has to be outsourced. And so our strategy with the grant, what we think is really compelling, is that through some of our studio partners, we believe we have an opportunity to, if we can get the grant funded, to create probably 25, 30 jobs pretty quickly just in that industry. It's like the bones are here. We just need a little bit of gas to throw on it. And then if you can do that, specifically in animation, and this is where the IP of the Society of the Hourglass comes into play. So live action shoots tend to be shorter term and more gig based, right? Like you're recording for a few weeks at a time. Animation production cycles are much longer. So you're looking at longer term jobs. So if we can get this kind of core group kicked off as they're working on this, new projects come in and they roll onto those. And so now suddenly we've kind of created this self-feeding cycle that, as long as the studios behind it are getting work, there's stuff for the people to work on. And and then you look at the opportunity there to kind of play into internships with the university, get new students involved and exposed to the process. There's a gap kind of between, just in the heartland, where there just isn't a lot from an educational standpoint in the film industry. And so I think there's an opportunity to address some of that here in Northwest Arkansas. And meanwhile, doing that kind of through bringing this IP that was born here kind of to life and into the market. So I think it's really compelling. We're in the process of doing that right now, and hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll be in a position where we feel like we've gotten the language around that pretty tight.
From my limited knowledge of kind of the NFT space, I know that current world events and economic situations have kind of, from the perspective of the NFT as a financial related asset, those things are kind of seeing some trouble around that. Do you worry at all that those types of things will cause people to lose interest, or do you see this as an opportunity for people to, and you kind of touched on this earlier, if that's the ceiling, then then there's not much hope for that platform. But do you see this as an opportunity to kind of reignite and reengage people around this as an opportunity, as they're seeing oh crap, maybe that's not the best retirement strategy. Maybe we look at the other applications of this.
I think it's a little bit of both, right? Certainly if you're solely relying on the performance of your NFT collection to kind of fund your operations, like, yeah, there's absolutely things that you should probably be concerned with, like rightfully so. When the price of ETH is half what it was 6 months ago, I think that's challenging from a financial perspective, because when you're selling these, you're doing it in whatever the currency of the blockchain you're on. We're on Ethereum, so ETH is the token through which we're fundraising. It has an impact. The thing that I think is important to keep in mind, though, is just zooming out from the day to day or even the month to month. Like in 2017, we saw this massive run. That's when I first got involved in crypto. Like I bought the very top of 2017 and saw it crash all the way down. I mean, even our like abysmal low right now is like 10 times higher than what the top was 4 years or 5 years ago. So that perspective is important. And I think if you believe in the technology and you believe that the general trend line is upward from pegging it to the US dollar, then it just becomes about like, how do I act as a good steward of what I've got right now, and stay as lean as possible so that I can kind of survive that period. And then to the other point, like I think it will shake out a lot of the like purely financially motivated plays in the space. Again, I don't think they ever go away entirely, and that's fine. But it is a great season to be building in, because as things recover and people maybe start to get a little bit more bullish and want to start speculating again, like who do you think is going to be better positioned then, right? Is it going to be the next anonymous thing that pops up out of nowhere, or is it going to be the team that's been building through the bear market for the last year, 2 years, however long it lasts, and has created some really, really compelling IP and brought some real stuff to market, delivered real value? And I think that's when we'll be in a position, I hope, to really start kind of separating from maybe some of the stereotypes of the space where it's all a scam, or it's all about money laundering, or it's just a bunch of crypto bros trying to get rich quick. And, all of which have a kernel of truth to them right now. So I think the sooner we can start diverging from that narrative, and it really does become about the technology and how rights and access and distribution works, the better.
And I think it's like companies like yours that are changing the narrative, right?
That's the hope, right? Like you want to be a part of pushing the space forward. And I think
we talked about buyer behavior and all this, but it's companies like yours that make it more real, more long-term, more stable,
as long as there are people creating opportunities to go full degen, like that's still going to be a part of it. But to your point, like when companies start coming in and really providing, just a new way to get involved with like this idea of supporting something you care about or you're interested in or passionate about. I mean, we've got people in our community that through this process are saying like, oh man, I haven't written this much in 10 years. And I'm a teacher and I'm spending like 3 hours of my own time a night just going deep writing these stories for these characters because I'm so like excited and energized by it. Like that's the kind of stuff that like when things get hard, I think back to that and like it fires me up all over again. If we can have that kind of impact as small as we are right now, like, man, what can we do when we do like really kind of break onto the main stage and get in front of more people?
And going back to kind of what we said earlier, you build like a fan base of folks who don't even care that it's NFTs. They're just there for the content, for the good storytelling. And then as a result, like as you're kind of in that bear market, building people that are passionate about the content, once things kind of take off again, you've got that core there that are ready to go back in and kind of support once things turn around. So
totally.
One of the questions we like to ask as we land the plane, because we're getting to that point in time, is if you had the opportunity to hop in that same time machine and go back in time and speak to young Joe, whether that's before Moxy Ox, whatever that is, just go back in time and give your younger self advice based on everything you've known, all the accumulated knowledge you have now. What might that advice be?
Man, That's a deep question. That could be, I mean, maybe there's two parts. One would be like buy Bitcoin when it was like less than $1. Yeah. But I don't know. Aside from that, it would probably be, I don't know, something to the effect that things are never as good or bad as they seem in the moment, maybe, and just kind of a little bit of perspective on weathering the storm. I think that's something that I think I'm better at now, but I used to really ride the roller coaster of the highs and lows of, I mean, being an entrepreneur, like that comes with the territory, right? And if you let yourself kind of feel those ups and downs so intensely all the time, like that's where burnout comes from.
You're gonna get sick. You're getting nauseous.
You're gonna get sick.
Yeah.
And you probably aren't going to want to ride that ride for very long. So just a little bit of perspective to kind of zoom out and not forget what's important, because it's really, really easy to do when you get wrapped up in things.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are in over 100 countries, want to know more about you, want to know more about the Society of the Hourglass project you're working on, how can they get involved? How can they reach you?
A few different ways. One, our website, societyofthehourglass.com. We've got links out to everything we're doing there. We've got more information on the book that we're working on, the series, the NFTs. You can kind of check out the characters in the world, and you can download the handbook, like everything you need to really kind of get your mind immersed in the world to understand what the opportunity for building is. And Twitter is a place where we're pretty active. At Hourglass_NFT is our Twitter handle. Anytime we are doing anything new or have new news to share, typically we're doing that in our Discord first, which is linked to on our Twitter account, and then sharing it on Twitter as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's where it's happening.
Well, we appreciate you for joining us.
I appreciate you having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was a great episode. Absolutely. Can't wait to do this again in a year or two and hear the update.
Yeah. Hopefully
the launch.
Calling in from the Oscars or something.
We'll have like a whole episode around the launch of the show.
There was a joke where, so one of our community members and I have this very antagonistic relationship in a joking way, and I made a bet with him that if we ever won like a Emmy or an Oscar, he could slap me on stage. So his goal is to make that happen so that he can hold me to that.
You got to give him the right motivation.
Yeah, that's some good motivation.
Awesome.
I love it.
Well, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. This is fun.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.